Good morning. How's everyone doing? Yes! 9 o'clock and we started with a woo. I'm Ben McAvoy. I'm one of the co-founders of TAAFI. I just wanted to kick things off by, first of all, welcoming you to Chorus Atrium and to the first TAAFI industry. I imagine most of you guys have seen TAAFI in another form at some point, either as a job fair or a film festival or a bunch of people crying in a room, which is mostly my experience. This is our first chance to take what we've done in previous festivals, which included talks and screenings and parties, and isolate the talks, because a lot of people said, we just want to hear really amazing people talk about the industry, talk about techniques, talk about their projects, and so here we are. And it seems to be like it's going to be a busy weekend. So I want to welcome you here. We're really excited to be here in Chorus, as well as George Brown. We have 65 speakers this weekend, so it's going to be pretty jam-packed for all of us. Hopefully you have a chance to see all of them. Lots of things going on throughout the day, as well as we have a party tonight at the Bouncing Ball over at Boxcar Social, so make sure you stick around for that. Otherwise, I just want to start us off really quickly by saying a big thank you to the people who've helped us make this happen, which includes our platinum sponsor, Chorus Entertainment in Nelvana. We've been working with Chorus in Nelvana for almost 7-8 years that we've been in business, and they've been a huge supporter for us, allowing us to use this amazing space, providing us a lot of the much needed funding to be able to do what we do. It's a reminder that TAAFI is a volunteer not-for-profit, and every year we get together and try and find a way to help people like yourself connect with people like yourself and people like yourself. That was supposed to be a joke. That's when you laugh. Okay. So we want to thank Chorus, we want to thank our sponsors, we want to thank our staffy, our volunteers who you'll see in blue shirts today. If you do see them, all these people have taken a bit of time out to help us, so please give them a big thanks as well. And of course, we want to thank our speakers for making the time to come and talk about what they do, and we want to thank you for supporting this event. Together, we're trying to make the animation industry in Toronto, and perhaps even beyond, something that's even greater than what it already is. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Ross Maudsley, the head of operations and technology at Nelvana, who's going to introduce our keynote on behalf of our platinum sponsor, Chorus. Thanks.
It says speak into the mic. Makes sense. Good morning, everybody. So on behalf of Chorus, I want to welcome you all today. As Ben mentioned, I work for Nelvana. Whoops, I wasn't speaking into the mic. As Ben mentioned, I work for Nelvana. If you're not familiar with the layout around here, Nelvana's up there on 4. It's windows gazing out on beautiful Lake Ontario. As we look across the industry, it's been a very busy year, that's for sure. If you look across the industry as a whole, if you look across the Toronto animation scene, it's just studios stacked to the rafters with work and new series seemingly starting up every week, new platforms of distribution that are launching and picking up steam. The entertainment marketplace seems to have a great appetite for this art form at this time. And listen, all the extra demand is extremely energizing, and it excites you with all of the new possibilities. But it has its challenges too. The competition for talent is fierce. If you're sitting next to, or if you are a junior animator or a designer, if you could just cover your ears for the next few minutes, I would have to say the world is your oyster, at least at the moment. That's right. And we as people who are operating studios are asking ourselves, what do they want? You know, what do they seek as we try to recruit them? It's money, sure, and a chance to work on a great show. And I'd have to say gamification of the workday, all right, yeah, that may be too. But I would have to say if I could drop one word into the ear of the young, talented, restless animator, designer, modeler, that last piece of the puzzle in your quest for professional fulfillment, that word would be lake views, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. So kicking things off for TAAFI Industry is Fred Seibert, the founder and CEO of Frederator Networks and the Chief Creative Officer of WOW Unlimited. Fred continues to have a fascinating and varied career in the world of entertainment and media. Some of the stops along the way, he was at one time a producer of jazz records. He founded his own record label around that time. He was MTV's first creative director. You can imagine the cultural impact that one has when you are MTV's first creative director. He was at one time the president of Hanna-Barbera Cartoons, and the list goes on. In the late 90s, Frederator Studios was founded, producing landmark shows like The Fairly Odd Parents, Adventure Time, and Bravest Warriors. He is what happens when talent meets ambition, meets audacity, meets a great head of hair, and we're very excited to have him with us this morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome Fred Seibert.
Hello. Thank you. Thanks for having me. You know, this is our 20th anniversary at Frederator. I'm sitting down. I pulled my back out last night, that crazy party. So I look at a tape like this, and I'm overwhelmed by how much we've been able to accomplish over that time. It's amazing. Before I really get started with what I am going to talk about, I want to just acknowledge a couple of people in the audience. One is my partner in WOW Unlimited Media, Michael Hirsh, who's over there, the founder of our platinum sponsor here, Nelvana. Went on to Cookie Jar DHX. We formed WOW Unlimited a couple of years ago. It's been a great experience for me. Working with Michael, who I've known for many years, but only recently had a chance to work side by side with. And his dedication to animation is just inspiring to me every day that we work together. The other person is a former colleague of mine, Linda Szymanski. I know she's in here somewhere. There she goes. And the reason I'd like to acknowledge her, yes, thank you, is that I should acknowledge that I have a very bad attitude toward network executives, especially having been one at a certain point. And when I started Frederator and started doing animation, one of the things that shocked me is how few of the executives that I was dealing with really gave a damn about animation one way or the other. And Linda is one of those real exceptions. She has not just a great feeling for the form, but for the artists and animators and writers who make it. She and I first had our first long conversation bumping into each other in a comic book store in Greenwich Village before I actually ever had any thought that I would be in the animation business. And we just had a really long, pleasant conversation about some of the people we knew in common, the joys and frustrations of working at a network and what happens there. And over these years, that was probably about 25 years ago or so, she has continued to be a champion of those of us who are in this business at all different levels. Look, the truth is I have no skills whatsoever in the animation business. I can't draw, I can't write, I can't make a schedule. I couldn't keep one if I could make it. I don't have any idea how to budget anything. But I'm in this business because I'm a fan. And I'm a fan of all sorts of people who make things. How many people here are artists or animators in that area, like most of you? So I'm a fan, just generally. And I like being involved with creative people I talk all the time about the fact that my life changed. I was going to be a chemist. I went to college to be a chemist because everyone in my family are scientists. And a few weeks into college, I realized that I like the Beatles more than I like science. And I walked out and I never looked back. And since then, whether it was my time, making jazz records or being an executive, an accidental executive, I should say, at a television network, I've just looked for people to fall in love with and fall in love with their work. And that's why I point out Linda, because she's one of those people who does that. So thanks, Linda. Like, all of us appreciate it. It's been a great ride for all of us. So I was trying to figure out what to talk about, and Michael pointed out to me that when the idea of the short films that Frederator has been involved with for more than 20 years comes up, people are interested and want to talk about it. And I realized that publicly I had never really said much about how we go about doing what we do or how it came to be. So I figured that's what I talk about today. Please come up with lots of questions. I'll try to keep this story compact, which is hard for me because I have a big mouth. And I'd rather answer your questions about the things that you're interested in rather than trying to guess what they are. So, long story short, I was the first executive at MTV. I was also the first senior person to quit MTV. I'm a really bad employee. And after a certain while, I had a really hard time with authority and following the rules, so I quit and started my own business. And luckily for me, the same boss that I quit on turned around and hired my new company back to help the various things that happen at MTV Networks. And one of them was Nickelodeon, which at the time was the lowest rated network in America. There were 30 cable networks, and it was number 30. It had one show that had a rating. Canada's You Can't Do That on Television. And Jerry Laybourne had just been appointed to revive the channel or shut it down. They weren't really sure which one it was going to be. And my partner, Alan Goodman, and I were hired. We came in, we did a lot of research and playing around, and we did a little of this and a little of that. And about 6 months later, Nickelodeon had gone from being the number 30 network to the number 1 network. And my reputation has been riding on that ever since. We had a really lucky run. And I had a very close relationship with those Nickelodeon people, but here's what I was. I was a marketing guy. My partner and I really sort of invented the concept of branding television networks, which before the advent of specialty channels had never existed. Every network was for everybody. And now we were in the business of being for somebody. At MTV's case, we were for teenagers and young adults. At Nickelodeon, we were for kids, primarily 6 to 11-year-old kids, but some preschool kids in there too. But what we did is we made 30-second promos that delivered a message. We think we did it nicely and fun and all that type of stuff. And the animation that I was involved with was basically taking the logo of the network and wiggling it for 10 seconds. It wasn't character-based, it wasn't story-based. I didn't know anything about characters or story. And one day, a couple of the big executives at Nickelodeon took me to lunch and said, we've been licensing cartoons like Belle and Sebastian and Danger Mouse, and they're doing incredibly well. But as Nickelodeon grows bigger and bigger and bigger, we have to pay more and more for them. And we just noticed that the amount we're paying to license those cartoons, we might be able to make our own. I said, oh, that's interesting, that's great, good luck. And they said, so what should we do? I go, well, you just told me you want to make your own cartoons, you should make cartoons. They said, yeah, but how? And I said, why are you asking me? I have no idea. She said, well, you do our animation. I said, no, we wiggle the logo for 10 seconds, and by the way, we don't even do that. Animators that we find from around the world, they do that. They said, well, you're the only person we know, what should we do? And I was kind of stuck. Here's what I knew about animation. I had watched cartoons when I was a kid. When the Beatles came around, I stopped watching cartoons. I always liked them, but I had stopped, I was like out of the loop. But luckily, sometime in maybe the year before they asked me this question, I had read a book about cartoons. Leonard Maltin and Jerry Beck wrote a book. Somebody in here probably knows the name of it. I've forgotten the name of it. And I didn't hear you, I'm sorry. Okay, whatever. They wrote a book, look it up. Leonard Maltin, Jerry Beck. And it basically told the history of cartoons as we knew them up until that time. And I learned a lot in that process from reading that book. So I started improvising, as I have a tendency to do with these two executives. And I said, well, you should go back to the way they did it back in the day when it was, theatrical shorts. Because now the way I understand it is Joe Barbera goes into an executive's office, does a little razzle-dazzle pitch with a couple of boards, and insists on getting a 13-episode order without ever knowing whether anything's any good other than on Joe's word. And that doesn't seem like all that logical. You have to spend millions of dollars before you have any idea what's gone on. And back in the day, they used to make these shorts, and they would make them one at a time. And they would put them up in the movie theater, and if people liked them, they would make another short, and when people stopped liking them, they would stop making the shorts. So that, Tex Avery would come up with Screwball Squirrel, they would make 6 of them and realize they had made a horrible mistake, and they stopped making them. And Joe and Bill made Tom and Jerry, and they made hundreds of them because they just kept working. Why don't you guys do that? And they said, oh, great, we'll do pilots. I said, no, stop, not pilots. Why not? I said, well, pilots are things that you guys make that you show to nobody so that you can spend a year after the pilot messing with it and changing everything in it to be what you want it to be. And it's different than what that original thing was. What I'm saying is, why don't you make a film that actually will go on your television network and let kids decide what they like or don't like, and then you can do that. And they, yeah, thanks, pilots. That's a great idea. We're gonna do pilots. And by the way, they went and did 5, and they were really, really successful. That's where Ren and Stimpy, Rugrats, and Doug came out of. It's not like their system didn't work, but I was really pissed off because they didn't listen to me, and I wanted them to listen to me and do it my way. And while I helped them promote those and make those cartoons really, really popular, I was seething with anger underneath. I had rage that they didn't listen to me, but what's new? Your clients never listen to you, right? So I just sort of sucked it all up and went on my day. Until about 2 years later, I get a phone call from a guy called Scott Sassa, who ran Ted Turner's entertainment division. And he said, we bought Hanna-Barbera last year. I said, yeah, I saw it in the papers, good luck. He said, it's a disaster. They haven't had a hit since the Smurfs in 1981. I said, gee, that's too bad, good luck. He goes, well, why don't you come and run it? And I paused. I said, Scott, I don't know anything about cartoons. He goes, it couldn't be any worse. They haven't had a hit. And you do all this stuff at Nickelodeon. And I went on, I wiggled the logo and all that type of stuff. He goes, no, look, really, you should do this. You're not happy. I had a company at the time. I was a branding agency and a advertising agency, but I didn't really like doing it. We made a lot of money, but I didn't love doing it. And then the kicker was, I looked at my watch. It was 10:35 in the morning on a February day. And on my watch, at 12 on my watch was Fred Flintstone. And at 3 on my watch was Huckleberry Hound, one of my favorite characters. At 6 was Yogi Bear, and at 9 was Scooby-Doo. I had to do it. And 3 months later, I'd close my ad agency. I go to Los Angeles. I walk in the door. The very first time I walk into the Hanna-Barbera building, I'm the boss. I had wondered for 20 years, what went on in that building? it must be magic, you know, they like all this great stuff that I had done. And of course I walked in, it was a building, you know, it was nothing, you know, different than any other building. And I brought the staff together, the senior staff. I said, look, there's good news and bad news here. The bad news maybe for you is I don't know anything about cartoons. But the good news is you do. And I'd be really appreciative if you just told me what to do, because I have no idea what happens here and what we should do. And there were sort of two reactions in the room. There are the people who were horrified, and one by one they started to quit, because they had worked in a studio where Joe and Bill were benevolent dictators, depending on who you talk to as to whether they were benevolent or dictators. And they were used to taking orders. And then there were a bunch of other people who just didn't want to get fired. But there was one or two, you know, one in particular that came up to me afterwards. He was 5 or 6 years older than me. He said, how can I help you? Like, what can I do? By the way, his name is Larry Huber. He is a guy who started in the business when he was 20, when he graduated from Chouinard Art School in Los Angeles, now Cal Arts, and is still in the business, and in fact, rents 2 offices from me in our Burbank studio and still works with us regularly and still shows up every morning and says, how can I help? One of the, you know, the great colleagues that you want to have in your life. And I started talking about my ideas for shorts and trying to revive the idea of doing things the way they did in the theatrical days. And you know, generally people said, well, you know, you can't do that anymore. That was then, this is now, television's different and all that. And I didn't really understand why it was so different. I had a couple of years where I was fighting with Ted Turner over rights and who owns what in this process. We finally kind of worked it out that in the animation business, it should be just like it is in the live action business, which is if somebody comes up with an idea, it's their idea. It's not owned by the company. It was really, really hard for Ted. You know, he was one of those guys, if I pay you, I own you, you know, kind of thing. But he eventually came around because Ted is a really, you know, he's a genius and a big thinker. And I started talking about this idea with anyone that I met, whether it was somebody in the animation business, somebody in the live action business, somebody was in the roofing contract business. I was just on fire about the idea of bringing back this idea. And little by little, I started learning things about how things work. So for instance, you know, I'm a producer. My job is to get the most for the least in certain ways. And so I would go to the animators in the company and tell them, well, what I want to do is I want to make a bunch of 3-minute cartoons. I want to make as many as possible. And one of them, a guy called Pat Ventura, a writer and an artist, started yelling at me immediately. He said, you can't do 3 minutes. You can't learn anything in 3 minutes. You have to have at least, you have to be like, you know, classic cartoons. They have to be 6 or 7 minutes, and that's the only way you're gonna know enough. You're gonna know whether you have great characters. You know, like in 3 minutes, all you're gonna do is figure out whether you have a gag and all this type of stuff. And I very reluctantly like started redoing the budgets and figuring out how much it was gonna cost me to do 6 minutes. And little by little, I came up with a plan. And I went to Ted Turner and I said, look, here's what I would like to do. I would like you to give me another $10 million. You gave me $10 million last year. Can you give me another 10? And this time we're gonna make a lot of short films. I think at the time I probably said 50, it turned out to be 48. And Ted very logically said, why should we give you that money? You just spent $10 million. You made 2 series, 2 Stupid Dogs and SWAT Cats, the Radical Squadron, and they failed immediately. Like, why should I trust you to, you know, you obviously have no idea what you're doing. Now, Ted's an entrepreneur, and he's a really, really smart, logical entrepreneur. And I said, Ted, I took 2 shots. I got up to bat twice. This way, we get up to bat 50 times. And even if I'm a complete idiot, don't you think like one of them will work? And he looks for a second, and he goes, you're right, that's a great idea, let's do that. And all of a sudden, he wrote us a check. We budgeted out the thing. Like I said, we ended up with 48 cartoons. And then we had to announce this idea. We announced it to the world, and here's the process by which we announced it. There were some animators that I started to get to know, and they pointed out to me, is there anybody in here who's primarily a writer of animation? Great, so when I say what I'm about to say, I'm not insulting you. It's gonna sound like an insult. But these animators would say to me, look, if you look at all the credits in an animated film, and you look at all the credits in the live action film, what's the difference between the credit rolls? I go, what's the difference? He goes, animated films have animators. Why are they the least important people in modern animation? You have a staff of writers on staff, and they seem to generate everything. I said, well, aren't the writers important and all that? And he said, yeah, but all the greatest cartoons were written by artists who write cartoons. You should really work with artists. And in fact, there was a small independent studio in town. It was run by John Cristofalusi, who I know, like in the last few months, has been highly discredited with really, great reasons. But he was a very smart guy, and when you walked into his studio, he had a sign up that said, if you can't draw, you can't write. And people started explaining to me the difference between a writer and an artist in animation, and here was the explanation I got. It probably doesn't hold water, but it made sense to me at the time. He said, well, everyone thinks that, Bugs Bunny and bombs are really funny. Like the bomb gets lobbed into Bugs Bunny's hand, it blows up, ha ha ha, and all that. And so writers will write, and the bomb goes off in the middle of a comedy script. And they said, here's what happens. What does the bomb look like? Because, bombs aren't funny unless they're drawn funny. And then what is the lob into somebody's hand? What does that look like? Like, how long does it take, and what trajectory does it have? And then when it gets there, how long does it sit in Bugs Bunny's hand? And what's the look on his face when he sees it's about to explode? And then it explodes, and what does the explosion look like? And what is the aftermath? Like, how do the pieces fall down? Does Bugs disintegrate and he fall? Those are the things that makes the bomb going off funny, not, and the bomb goes off. And this made a lot of sense, so, at least to me. So I go out into the world, I announce that we're gonna do shorts, and we're only gonna take pitches from artists. And the pitches aren't gonna be ideas. They're not gonna be Bibles, they're not gonna be concepts. They're not gonna be the guy who walked into my office like the first week when I was on a job and he goes, imagine, he's a pig. He works in a post office, but he's really a superhero. I went, okay, what do I do now? He goes, well, now you pay me to develop it. I'm like, this makes no sense to me, whatsoever. So the pitch that I want for a cartoon is, I want a beat board. I want to see the whole thing. I want to see from beginning, middle, and end. People came up and said, well, you're going to pay us to do this, right? I said, no, you're going to do this because you want to do it. And by the way, you're going to own it. I'm going to have nothing to do with it. If I don't like it and you love it, you can go to the next studio, and the next studio, it's yours. So a lot of people didn't like that. The writers sure didn't like that. The writers would come to me and go, well, what do I do? And I said, there's a lot of artists in LA. At the time we were based in LA, it was all that. I said, why don't you go find one and find a partner, and why don't you guys work on your idea together? Because maybe the artist will bring something to the table that you didn't think about because you're a writer. And by the way, you're a writer and you might have an idea about how to, develop character and tell story that the artist doesn't know. What a great partnership you guys could have. We announce it, 5,000 pitches come in. I have to say I was completely overwhelmed, particularly because, as I said, I knew nothing about cartoons. So as we started setting up pitches, the other thing that I had come to over the years in the other things that I had done is I actually wanted to hear the pitch out of the mouth of the person who had come up with it. For some reason, I had maybe I'm a bad reader or something. Maybe I have a hard time reading. But just looking at something, I couldn't tell whether I wanted to do it. I wanted to see the energy of that creator. I wanted to see how did they imagine the timing, the voicing. Not that they were voice actors or anything like that, but I just wanted to see it come alive in real terms. But I was scared to have anyone pitch me because I knew I didn't know anything. So we put together a room. At the time, Ted had just started the Cartoon Network. Linda was working there. Her boss, Mike Lazo, was working there. There were a few people on my Hanna-Barbera team that I really believed in. And I figured that if I put enough smart people in the room watching the pitch, that I could read their faces and their reactions, and that would help me make my decisions. And sure enough, that's what we did. We got storyboards from literally like all over the world, a lot of them from LA, and little by little, we did these pitches. Some of them were great, some of them were bad, most of them were bad, I mean, truth be told. And the next part of the process sort of played itself out in what I realized was a really fascinating way. So one of the pitches that came in was from Genndy Tartakovsky, who many of you know now, Dexter's Laboratory, Samurai Jack, Clone Wars, Hotel Transylvania movies. But Genndy had been on our crew for our show, Two Stupid Dogs. He was a director, and he pitched Dexter's Laboratory, and we said yes to to doing the short. But honestly, I barely remember being in the room. It didn't make an impression on me one way or the other, but there was something about the sense of the room that was good. And back in those days, it was before we were doing animatics, and a pencil test came back, and they showed me the pencil test, and honestly, I don't remember the pencil test at all. It was, like one of the weird things about this shorts process is the day you say yes, you feel like you have the next Bugs Bunny or the next SpongeBob or something like that. And funny enough, the second it goes into production, you have like a slightly less good feel, or you have no feeling at that point. Like it just sort of settles down a little bit. And most of the time, all the way through the process, even to seeing the final cartoon, you wondered what it was you saw in the original thing, because somehow or other it just doesn't come out the way you were imagining it. And Dexter's was one of those. It was, the pencil test came in, it was fine. The color came in, it was fine. The scoring comes in, it was fine, but I didn't give it a second thought. I don't know, about a month later, Genndy comes back in the office and said, I want to play you Dexter's Laboratory. I said, I already saw it. He goes, oh, no, I did some tweaking and all that type of stuff. And he played it again. It was magic. I was like, Genndy, did I miss something the first time around? He goes, no, it wasn't good. I said, yeah, okay, so what happened? He goes, oh, well, I re-edited the back half and I threw out the score. This is a guy who, by the way, never even finished his thesis film in college. He had never finished a film in his life. I went, what do you mean you threw out the score? He goes, oh, I went to the composer and it just wasn't right. And we did the sound effects all wrong. And I'm a producer. I'm like, did you go over budget? He goes, oh no, they did. I was amazed, that the scoring composer went and redid it. And I said, and what did you re-edit? This is animation, you shot what you shot. He goes, yeah, but I was able to take the pieces and put them out in a different way. And I'm telling you, the film was magic. There was no debate at that point that would become the first series that came out of this series of shorts called What a Cartoon. When it was finally said and done, we did 6 series out of them. I had left when the last ones were greenlit. Linda and Mike Lazo greenlit Powerpuff Girls, Courage the Cowardly Dog, which was a friend of Linda's from New York, John Dilworth. But we got 6 series, and they didn't all do phenomenally, but they all did really pretty well, and they were the They were the girding of what created the modern Cartoon Network. You know, I mean, you know, if you go to their Boomerang channel, they're still running, you know, pretty much all of them. Powerpuff Girls was recently revived. And for me, and most gratifying for me, Gendy Tartakovsky, Craig McCracken, Paul Rudish, Rob Renzetti, Dave Feast, these people are now the veterans of our business, the people that many of you look up to, the people that the world industry looks up to as the avatars of what it means to be an animation creator in the modern world. And every young person that comes in and shows us a pitch tells me pretty much, you know, in very similar language, how much their modeling made a difference to the reason that they're making cartoons, you know, in this day and age. It's been an amazing experience for me to be part of this. Our company, along with the Hanna-Barbera shorts that we did, we've done 250 shorts over the last 25 years. With the exception of Wow Wow Wubsy and a show called Superfuckers and Castlevania, which just came out on Netflix, every other hit series we've had has come out of one of these shorts. We're doing 2 more into production starting in January. From a short we did in 2013 called Manly by Jesse and Justin Moynihan, Jesse being out of our Adventure Time team. Bee and Puppy Cat, the series that we do with Natasha Allegri, she also was an artist on the Adventure Time team. We're doing a new series with her as we speak that will be out next year. And one of my favorites, a show called The Summoning by a creator named Elise Castro who lives in Australia. And thanks to modern technology, none of us have ever met her. We've done everything by video conference. I'm hoping that once we start the series next year, we'll get a chance to actually meet her in person, because she made an amazing film. It did 10 times the amount of viewership than any of the other shorts in this bunch that we've done. And I will tell you, it's an amazing thing for me to watch. Now, those of you who are gonna come up to me afterwards and pitch me your cartoons, I'm happy to talk to any of you. I have cards for all of you. We'll start to meet by video conference and all that. But realize that, like, I'm the wrong guy, right? I dropped out of the process myself of being a person who says yes or no to anyone's cartoon about 12 years ago. And that's when Penn Ward pitched us his original Adventure Time short. One of the most interesting pitches I've ever been in, because he started it by playing a guitar and singing a song, which truly has never happened in any other pitch that I've had. And me, the brilliant animation person who allegedly knows things, I turned it down. And I said no. Penn was 1 month out of school. His drawing style is, you know, his personal drawing style is relatively primitive. It's beautiful and designed wonderfully, but, you know, he's not a great draftsman. And I felt like he was showing us a student film or something, or an art film. And I had a prejudice because I became one of the executives I have no respect for, which is I thought I knew something. I thought that what I saw was meaningful. And, you know, the truth is the only person who's meaningful is that creator and what they think. And that my judgment has to be about them, not about it. Right, because by believing in creators, we invest in a long-term relationship. You know, the way that I put it, we just finished production on The Fairly Odd Parents after 20 years. I had to want to be in a room with Butch Hartman for 20 years, right? For me personally, like, I can't work with people that I don't want to be around. It doesn't mean that they're right or I'm wrong or they're good or I'm, you know, it's not about the quality of the work. It's like about the quality of my life. And by the way, the quality of their life. They don't want to be in a room with somebody for 20 years that they don't get along with either. And while Penn was a really nice guy, I just felt like I had a prejudice, right? He was like 1 month out of school, like what could he know? And he probably just has made student films and blah, 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 blah. And so I go back with my team. Eric Homan and Kevin Coldy run Frederator Studios now, have for the last, since that day I said no. And they brought me into the office and I said, well, we can't do that. And they're like, why not? I said, well, he's a kid and he doesn't draw and blah, blah. It doesn't look like the Fairly Odd Parents and, all this bullshit that I came up with. And they said, well, we have to do it. It's great. And by the way, we're doing 39, like most of them aren't going to work. Like, why not? No, I don't want to do, I was like really being a jerk. And finally, Eric, who has been a colleague of mine for 25 years, looked at me, he said, look, most of the time you're in a pitch, you have a fake laugh. Like you're trying to be polite, and laugh at the jokes and everything. But this time you really laughed. And I realized I was busted right there, because he was right. I really laughed, and it's a rare thing. A real laugh that you really feel, every one of us has been through this experience, is really a rare thing. And so we said yes, the rest is history. It's one of those series. I can't tell you how proud I am to be just sort of, I guess I'm distantly associated with it, right? I'm the one who said no, but like I can take some credit because eventually I said yes, right? And it turned into magic because Penn Ward is a magician. Every one of you who makes a film, you're all magicians, and people who make hit films are like special magicians. And then there's, people like Penn and there's a bunch of people. It isn't just him, and it isn't just the people we've worked with, it's all sorts of people. That's what our business is. It is a business, I said this last night at the reception last night. I come out of the music business. I love the music business. I love pop music. I love the whole process of the making of pop music. And there was a guy who founded Atlantic Records, one of the most venerable record labels of the last 100 years. His name is Ahmet Ertegun. He was a jazz and blues freak like I am. And people would say, so Ahmet, how do you succeed in the record business? And he would get up from wherever he was and he would lumber around like he was Frankenstein until he knocked himself into a wall. He goes, here's how you succeed in the music business. You just keep walking around until you bump into a genius. The rest is easy. And, in a lot of ways, that's how I have fueled my way through this business, is I don't know anything. I'm just a fan of really good people. And when we find really good people, we say, hey, is there a way we can help you? And if they say yes, we hold hands and we walk into the sunset together. If we say no, they go off and they do something else for someone else, and that's how it goes. I'm thrilled to be part of it. I'm thrilled to be here with all of you today, and I'm thrilled to take whatever questions you might have about anything, if any. Here's the problem. I haven't figured out how to time the thing of, do you have a question with enough other things to say while you get up the nerve either to raise your hand or formulate the question in your mind? Yes, sir. So the question is, where do I fall now between the script originated and the storyboard originated? Personally, I still fall into the storyboard originated. Of the 250 shorts we have made, almost all of them are artists who write their own material, but not exclusively. And Eric Homan, who runs development for us and really is one of the brains behind what we have accomplished over the last 10 or 12 years, he's a lot more open than I am to everything, right? But at the same time, especially when it comes to these short films, we do not make the short film, we do not greenlight the short film until there is a storyboard intact to time. I happened to greenlight the Powerpuff Girls short, the original short, without a board at all. I saw Craig McCracken's student film called The Whoop-Ass Girls. In the middle of it, I said, yes, we'll do that as a short. He pitched the board. It was fantastic, but it was like 25 minutes long. And I made the mistake of listening to our executive producer who said, oh, it'll be easy to cut down, and it'll cut really easily. And for any of you who have seen the original Powerpuff Girls short, it's really good, but it's really incoherent. Because what they did is they just sort of lopped pieces out of it. And I realized that, no, like we can't say yes until it's actually the picture we're gonna make, not sort of the picture we're gonna make. That being said, do I think that writers can write animated films? Yes. That being said, do I think that the artist and the animation portion of it is critical? Yes. Follow up. Yeah. 6 minutes. Yeah, I said I got yelled at saying that 3 minutes was no good. Okay. But there is one thing in your question that, the half question that got asked is when you're considering properties, I never think about properties. I really think about filmmakers who made a film where there's a character that we can fall in love with. Because if there's a character we can fall in love with, and that person has shown themselves to be capable and competent to make a film that you can fall in love with, that's the bet. I joke all the time, Michael and I have a slightly different perspective, I think, on this, but for me personally, I have no idea how to follow a trend. And what has happened for us because of that is we've ended up leading trends because what we're focused on is creators who have original voices. And our feeling is if they have a creator has an original voice and they made a film that resonated with people, everything else will take care of itself. Yes, sir. The question is, what makes a good character? I have no technical answer for you. I have no idea other than at the end of the picture, I'm in love. Or we're in love. The way Eric, my colleague, puts it is it's a character you want to hang around with. It isn't always a positive character. You know, Bugs Bunny is an obnoxious creep, but at the end you fall in love with him. He is winning and charming and all that type of stuff. And if I knew how to do that, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I'd be doing the film itself. I have no idea. I'm the audience who gets to react rather than the person who says, if you do this and you do that. I have no idea. If I knew, I'd be the filmmaker or the creator. Yes, sir, in the back.
I just had another question about your so it said not too long ago that you were looking for like a full achieve the full beginning, middle, and end. Is that if someone was to pitch to you, you know, a lot of people probably are thinking, what you would like to see?
When it comes to the shorts, which by the way, we only do one of our short show usually every 3, 4, 5 years. Figuring out how to pay for these things can be a challenge, and we don't go into production until we're paid for, right? And so I spend an enormous amount of my time trying to figure out how we're gonna pay for something, because the worst thing in the world is to say to someone, we love what you do, but we have no idea how to make it, or we have no idea how to get it made. So the notion of the beginning, middle, and end, the notion of the beat board that tells the entire cartoon, for me, my metaphor back to music is if you came to me and said, you know, I've written the greatest love song ever. It has a beautiful verse. The chorus is soaring and anthemic. There's a guitar solo in the middle and I'm like, stop. Can you just play me the song? Right? I don't understand the idea of an idea when ultimately all of you are experts at execution. Show me what the picture's actually gonna be, not what you think it's gonna be. Not what you make, because you know, I was in the advertising business. The ad is not the product, and a pitch is the ad. And by looking at a board that gives me the entire, or gives us, I should say, because it's not me anymore, gives us the entire picture, we have an idea that you know how to tell a story. Even if, in a short, it's not a story and a plot in the way it is in an 11-minute cartoon or in a 22-minute cartoon, right? It's a character in a situation, that has a logical flow and arc to it. Often, some of the best short cartoons just sort of stop, right? They ran out of funny and they, moved on, like a Monty Python sketch or something. But in the pitch, we have an idea. Is this actually a filmmaker? Do they have the competence to write their characters and understand the difference between character A, character B, and character C? Are they trying to put a season's worth of characters into a film to make sure you don't miss anything, which doesn't accomplish anything? The way I look at it, it's Bugs and Elmer and Tom and Jerry. You don't have to show everything in every film. All you have to do, easier said than done, is make the film great. Nothing else really matters. I don't care if there are a million other characters that are going to show up in this series. If you can make a great film with a character that somebody loves, we know you'll come up with other things to do with that character. Yes, sir.
What's the most common mistake that you see novice show creators make that isn't talked about?
The most common mistake that we see show creators that you don't hear much about, it's really that they do too much in their initial film. They make it a pilot. I don't really care about a pilot. I'm not sure about any of you, and I grew up in a different era than most of you. I grew up when most of the cartoons on television were theatrical shorts that had been repurposed for television. I didn't see the first Bugs Bunny, and I didn't fall in love with Tom and Jerry by seeing the first one. I just saw a random one and I fell in love. In a random one of the couple hundred pictures that were made for those characters, I saw one, and everything I needed to know about the character was in that film that was 100 films in. And by the way, with the first Bugs Bunny film, you don't get quite everything. For anyone who saw the originals that were done, it took a little while for it to turn into the Bugs Bunny that we, super fell in love with. So I think that people try to do too much in their pitch instead of just really focusing on, is the character great, is the picture great?
What place do you think adult animation has in the world where it's so dominated by children's animation? What do you think is the future of adult animation?
So what do I think is the future of adult animation in a world that is dominated by kids animation? I think the future is bright, and I think it's slow. The thing to my mind that really blew open the doors for commercial, popular, maybe not adult animation, but older animation was Beavis and Butthead in the early 90s. And I thought that was the beginning of a sweep of the whole world changing. And sure enough, a bunch of stuff changed, right? South Park came out. We could debate whether Family Guy is an adult animation or not. There have been a lot of adult-oriented animation since then. We have done, this last one that we did for Netflix, Castlevania, is as adult as you can get. It's dark, it's violent, it's nasty, it's frankly not my personal cup of tea. I'm not a horror guy. But it is still slow. I think that most of the executives who are buying have not grown up with animation for themselves after they were kids. And until the generation that has really been fully inculcated in a full diet of animation that isn't just kids, right? Castlevania is a really great example. We had a script for 10 years before we found a buyer for it. And my belief is that until we found buyers who had grown up with video games, we were never going to get a yes, right? So a lot of this is the buying generation. And by the way, a lot of this is people making their own films for YouTube and finding audiences for them. Bee and Puppy Cat is a great example, right? The original set of shorts had elements that you could say were friendly to kids. I guarantee you the new series that we have is not so much friendly to kids because Bee is an adult. She might be an immature, irresponsible, funny adult, but she's an adult. And the character is grappling with things in her own fantastic way that adults grapple with. We can't sell it for kids. There's no way, whereas, Bravest Warriors that we're now doing in a partnership with Nelvana, it was originally made for kids, then we aged it up a little bit, now we've aged it down a little bit. There's still complaints that it's too old, but it's more or less, it's kid-friendly, that type of thing. Once we get a generation of buyers on the commissioning side that fully embrace, that's going to be a little easier. And once filmmakers start making their own films, finding their own audiences for them, so that in fact the executives cannot deny the property, that's when I think we're really going to change. But I still think it's a slow process that we're in. Anything else? We'll take this last one in the back. The question is, in a world where sometimes something comes out, it doesn't do quite so well, and then it finds life afterwards. I will say, as a filmmaker or producer, anytime people embrace your film, you jump for joy, you go out and celebrate, you get right back to work, and you go, great, people love it, and let's move on. I guess the most famous example of that in the last 20 years is Family Guy, right? Where it was left for dead. God bless Mike Lazo, he resurrected it, and now Seth MacFarlane is a multi-hyphenate, God bless him. What we have found is that we have to figure out just a business structure for us to be patient, right? And we have, I think, figured that out, over time. I think I mentioned that we're gonna make this series called Manly. We made the short in 2013, and people have been saying no to it pretty regularly since 2013. Adventure Time. Nickelodeon had an option on it for 2 years, turned it down 5 times. We ripped up a deal that was worth $1 million a year to us to be exclusive to Nickelodeon, to be able to take it elsewhere. God bless Cartoon Network for saying yes to it, but it was 5 years. It's frustrating, it's difficult. Without over-romanticizing ourselves, we're deep believers. We never fucking let go, right? And the truth is, Kevin Coley came to us when he came to work with us in 2005. He had Castlevania in his pocket then. We have suffered no, ever no. We will never, ever say yes to this until a guy called Larry Tanz at Netflix said yes. We were patient. That's how we've been with Manly. We've been patient, and here's how we got patient. We started our own channel called Cartoon Hangover Select. It's a subscription channel in the States. Hopefully it'll be in Canada and other English-speaking countries soon. And you know what? Screw them all, we're making it for ourselves. We know it's gonna work. I think that's it. I appreciate all your time. I know you have a question, we can talk afterwards. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here.